My name is Samantha Green, and if you'd asked anyone in my family to describe me 2 months ago, they'd probably say something like, "Oh, she's off somewhere in Africa doing aid work or something, saving goats or teaching kids to read." Not really sure. I'm 30 years old, a humanitarian. I've spent the last decade building education programs for girls in conflict zones: Yemen, South Sudan, Afghanistan, places most people can't even point out on a map. And while I've had moments of fear, heartbreak, and exhaustion, none of it ever came close to the numbness I felt when I realized my own family didn't think I was worth inviting to my brother's wedding. My parents, Lawrence and June Green, are traditional, let's say. Dad runs a regional bank chain. Mom was a college administrator before she retired to focus on hosting. You know the type: monogram napkins, Pinterest perfect brunches, and country club conversations about stocks and seasonal flower arrangements. Then there's Blake, my older brother, the golden child, the future CEO since age 12. Blake had the right degrees, the right girlfriend, now fiancé, and the perfect LinkedIn profile. I used to joke that if you Googled acceptable son, Blake's face would pop up holding a golf club and a Harvard diploma. But me? I was always the wild card, the idealistic one. I didn't follow the expected path. No MBA, no husband, no suburban starter home, just dirt-covered boots, dusty villages, and stories that didn't quite land at family dinners. Is it even safe there? Do you actually get paid? Must be hard not having, a real job. I tried for years to make them see the value in what I do. I'd send postcards, invite them to virtual conferences, even brought home a little girl's drawing once, a child I'd helped escape an early marriage. But my mom just said, "That's sweet," and folded it into her bag like it was a napkin from Panera. So when I heard, through a mutual friend of Blake's fiancé, that the wedding was happening in 3 weeks at a vineyard just outside Charleston, I waited. Waited for a text, an email, even a half-hearted, "You're welcome if you can make it." But nothing came. Not a word. I didn't confront them. I didn't beg. I didn't even bring it up during the weekly family Zoom, where my mom spent 20 minutes showing off the bridesmaid color swatches and pretending not to notice I was unusually quiet. What they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I just received an email that morning from Geneva, from the United Nations. I'd been nominated and chosen for the Global Humanitarian Impact Award. Out of thousands of applicants across 112 countries, they chose me, the forgotten daughter, the woman who didn't get a wedding invite, but got something far more powerful. I stared at the email for 5 full minutes, blinking away tears. Not from joy, not at first, but from a strange, burning sadness. Because the very first thought that came to mind wasn't pride. It wasn't, "I made it." It was, "They're never going to care." But oh, how wrong I was. Because what happened next, what I chose to do with that award, would change everything. Not just for me, but for the people who thought they could erase me without consequence. If you've ever been made to feel like the unimportant one in your own family, stay with me. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a story about reclaiming your name. Don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe if you want more stories where justice comes in unexpected and unforgettable Sati ways. The weeks leading up to my brother's wedding felt like watching a play I wasn't cast in, even though I was family. Every few days, another photo would pop up on social media. Blake and his fiancée Madison posing with their wedding planner, my mom toasting champagne with Madison's mother, a countdown post that read, "10 days until we say I do. Hashed Blake and Madison forever." My name wasn't tagged in any of them, not once. And while I tried to act like it didn't bother me, told myself I had bigger things to focus on, something about the silence stung deeper than I expected. Because it wasn't just about missing the ceremony, it was about being intentionally erased. I sat with it quietly. I didn't call, didn't lash out. Instead, I packed my bags and flew to Geneva. The award ceremony was surreal, held inside the Palais des Nations, surrounded by diplomats, humanitarians, world leaders. The hall shimmered with evening gowns and hushed reverence. I walked across that stage, trembling in a navy blue dress I borrowed from a colleague, and accepted the Global Humanitarian Impact Award. They read my name aloud, alongside a summary of the education initiative I co-founded, Project Dandelion, a network of mobile learning hubs that had reached over 50,000 displaced girls across conflict zones in just 4 years. As I stood under the lights, holding that glass and steel plaque, cameras clicking, applause echoing, a single image flashed in my mind: Blake's wedding invite list, and how my name wasn't on it. After the ceremony, reporters wanted quotes. UNICEF offered to partner. A delegate from Norway asked if I'd consider giving a TED Talk. But my mind? My mind was 4,000 miles away, stuck in a vineyard in Charleston, where my family would be gathering in less than 24 hours to celebrate Blake like he was the second coming of Elon Musk. So I made a decision. A quiet one. No drama, no threats. I simply booked a flight. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend Mia, who'd been the only person to send flowers after I won the award. I just printed out my flight confirmation, grabbed my award case, and packed one dress, a dark green satin number with subtle embroidery down the sides, gifted to me by a refugee woman I'd helped years ago. It had no designer label, but it carried meaning, far more than any monogrammed bridesmaid gown ever could. I landed in Charleston the next afternoon, checked into a hotel 20 minutes from the venue, and waited. I didn't plan to crash the wedding. That wasn't my style. I just needed to see it. I needed closure, even if that meant watching from a distance. But fate had other plans. While sipping coffee in the hotel lobby, I overheard a man on the phone. He was pacing, flustered. "She's stuck in Savannah," he said. "No, I don't have time to find another speaker. The MC canceled too. We need someone to fill time before the vows or the whole schedule falls apart." I didn't mean to eavesdrop, truly. But when he muttered Blake Green's wedding, my ears perked up like a tuning fork. I don't know what possessed me, but I stood up, walked over, and said, "Hi, I couldn't help overhearing. I might be able to help." He blinked. "Are you a speaker?" I smiled, holding out my award case. "In fact, I just spoke at the United Nations last night." He stared at the case, his eyes widening as he read the engraved words: Global Humanitarian Impact Award, Samantha Green. 10 minutes later, I was in a black SUV headed toward the vineyard, escorted by the same wedding coordinator who'd once brushed past me at a family dinner without even offering a hello. She knew who I was now. Everyone would. The vineyard was everything I imagined it would be: Pinterest perfect and nauseatingly curated. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. Rows of white chairs flanked a floral arch overlooking a golden sunset. Everyone was dressed like they'd just walked off the cover of Modern Southern Wedding. And there, in the middle of it all, was my family. Laughing, toasting, posing for photos like they'd never had a missing daughter. My mother, June, was in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than 3 months of my field budget. She was adjusting a boutonniere on Blake's lapel when she caught a glimpse of me. I didn't rush. I didn't flinch. I simply stepped out of the SUV, award case in hand, and walked straight down the gravel path like I belonged there. Because for the first time in my life, I knew I did. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Samantha? Is that? Oh my God, that's her from CNN!" Someone actually stood up. Then another, and another. A slow domino of movement as heads turned, jaws dropped, and heels clicked awkwardly against the stone patio. My brother froze. Blake had always been the confident one, the speech giver, the one who knew how to shake hands, make deals, charm investors. But in that moment, as I walked past rows of startled guests, he looked like a boy who had just realized he left the stove on. "Samantha," he said again, this time barely audible. "Hi, Blake," I said, smiling. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" The wedding planner, the same man I'd met at the hotel, appeared beside the podium. He held up a hand to hush the crowd, then cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know we're all eager to celebrate Blake and Madison's love story," he began. "But before we begin, we have a surprise moment of reflection, generously brought to us by one of the most courageous women I've had the honor of meeting." He gestured toward me. Please welcome Miss Samantha Green, recipient of the United Nations Global Humanitarian Impact Award. It was dead silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. I stepped up to the microphone, feeling my heart thump inside my ribs like a drum solo. I hadn't prepared anything. This wasn't rehearsed, but I wasn't nervous, because I wasn't here to make them proud. I was here to tell the truth. Thank you, I began. It's surreal to be here. I wasn't invited, which, to be fair, might have made this a bit awkward, but sometimes the most important stories are the ones no one wants to include in the script. Some people laughed nervously. My dad shifted in his chair. I've spent the last 10 years in some of the world's most difficult places, not because I wanted to escape home, but because home never quite made room for me. I worked with girls who'd been forced to marry at 12, girls who risked their lives just to learn how to read, girls who were told they didn't matter. I paused, and yet somehow, their stories gave me more belonging than the people who shared my last name. My voice didn't tremble, not once. I don't share this today to ruin a celebration. I share it because silence is a kind of complicity, because every family has a version of me, the child who didn't fit, who wasn't praised, who was left out. And sometimes we don't get a wedding invitation, but we get something else. I held up the award. We get seen, just not by the people we expected. Applause erupted. It wasn't polite or obligatory. It was real. From strangers. From guests who didn't know me but suddenly understood me. I locked eyes with my mom. She looked stunned, not angry, not embarrassed, just stunned. Like she was realizing for the first time that the daughter she dismissed had become someone the world respected. The MC stepped back in, gently thanking me and motioning for the ceremony to resume. I didn't stay. I didn't need to. As I walked back down the aisle, the same one my family never thought I deserved to walk, something inside me clicked into place. I didn't crash their party. I reclaimed my place in the story. I had just reached the gravel path near the parking lot when I heard the voice behind me. Samantha, wait! It was my mother. I turned slowly. She was breathless, one hand clutching her silk shawl like it might hold her dignity together. Behind her, my father followed, his face somewhere between confusion and damage control. And Blake lingered a few steps away, his hands in his pockets like he wanted to disappear into them. My mom started, but her voice caught. She tried again. What was that? That speech? You blindsided us. Blindsided. I raised an eyebrow. You mean like how I wasn't invited to my own brother's wedding? That's not fair, my dad said quickly, stepping forward. This day wasn't about you, Sam. You know that. I nodded slowly. You're right. It wasn't. That's why I left when I did. We didn't want drama, Mom whispered, voice trembling now. You always turn things into a statement. I turn things into a statement? I repeated, half laughing. You left me off the guest list and expected me to just sit quietly while you all smiled for the cameras. That's not how we meant it, she said. Then how did you mean it, Mom? I asked, stepping closer. Because from where I stand, it looks a lot like erasure. Silence. And then Blake finally spoke. You could have just called me. I looked at him, my golden brother in his custom suit and expensive cologne, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small in his shadow. I could have, yeah, I said, but we both know how that would have gone. You would have made it about your causes again, he muttered, almost to himself. My causes, I repeated. You mean children surviving war zones? Girls getting an education? Yeah, I guess that's a little less glamorous than artisanal cocktails and flower walls. He flinched. Look, I didn't come here to fight, I said, softer now. I came here because I deserved a seat at that ceremony. Maybe not as a sister, but as someone who's done the work, bled for it, believed in it. You embarrassed us, my mom snapped, the mask slipping. On the biggest day of Blake's life, I met her eyes, steady, unblinking. No, I reminded you I exist. That stopped her cold, and for a long moment, none of us spoke. Finally, my dad sighed. We just didn't think your world. and ours fit together. I nodded, quietly absorbing what he had just admitted, and then I said the truest thing I'd ever said to them. You're right, they don't. My voice didn't shake. I felt oddly calm, lighter even. I spent years begging you to see me. Not the version you wanted, not the daughter with the stable office job and the matching brunch set. Me. The girl who showed up to Christmas with dirt under her nails and stories you didn't want to hear. The woman who called from refugee camps, hoping you'd ask more than, so, when are you coming home? Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Tonight, I stopped needing your permission to matter. And with that, I turned and walked toward my rental car. No one followed. No one apologized. And that, strangely, was okay. A month after the wedding, I sat across from a woman named Imani at a sunlit cafe in Brooklyn. She was 26, a spoken-word poet, and had just been disowned by her parents for writing a viral poem about her queer identity. I watched your speech, she said quietly, stirring her iced chai. On loop, for days. It made me stop apologizing for being who I am. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, her grant application for uninvited voices. Amani was the first person to submit one. And just like that, the seed I had planted in my hotel room the morning after my brother's wedding, it was blooming. Within 6 weeks, we had over 400 submissions. Some were raw video clips. Others were journals, letters, poems, lesson plans, music demos. People poured their truths into our inbox like they'd been waiting for permission to matter. I didn't need a full nonprofit structure to start. I used my own savings for the first 5 microgrants. Just $500 each, enough to help someone print their first chapbook, rent a space for a small gallery show, buy supplies for a free community class. And the best part? These weren't charity cases. They were revolutions in motion. Of course, not everything was smooth. My parents didn't reach out again, not a call, not even a passive-aggressive text. And I didn't reach out either. But the silence felt different now. It wasn't absence. It was choice. Mine. Blake, on the other hand, sent me a LinkedIn message. Just a single sentence. Guess you got what you wanted. I stared at it for a while, then typed back. Not even close. I'm just getting started. I never got a reply. One morning, as I was walking into a podcast studio for an interview, I passed by a newsstand. There, on the front cover of Time magazine, was a headline that stopped me in my tracks. The power of uninvited, the movement that started from one woman's silence. Below it was a candid shot of me on stage at the wedding. Not smiling, not posings, just standing there, telling the truth, back straight and eyes forward. I bought 5 copies, not to show my family, not to prove anything, but because the version of me on that cover, she wasn't trying to be accepted anymore. She was leading. At one of our first Uninvited Voices events, we gathered in a rented church basement lit with string lights and mismatched chairs. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt sacred. People stood and told their stories. A man whose fiancé's family never acknowledged his existence. A woman who put herself through school after her parents spent everything on her brother's startup. A girl who wrote a song for her sister's wedding, only to find out it was never played with it, because the DJ was told to skip anything from her. I sat in the back listening, not as the award winner, but as someone who understood. Because the wound they carried, I carried it too. But here's the thing about uninvited people. When they finally find each other, they build their own rooms where no one has to prove they belong. A few weeks later, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was short, hesitant. Hey, Samantha, it's Madison, Blake's wife. I just wanted to say, I watched your TEDx talk, and I think you should know I resigned from the board of his company last week. You were right. Some families just don't know how to make room. Anyway, thank you. I didn't call back, not out of spite, but because I knew, for once, my voice had echoed where it needed to. The irony in all of this, I never wanted to be the center of attention. I never craved the spotlight. I just wanted to be seen as I was. Messy, honest, imperfect, whole. And now I am. Not because of a wedding, not because of an award, but because I stopped waiting to be invited and built the door myself. Because that night, in my quiet little hotel room with peeling wallpaper and a view of the parking lot, I opened my laptop and watched the playback of the ceremony online. The comments section was flooded, not with congratulations for Blake and Madison, but with people, strangers, writing things like, "She walked in with grace and truth." That speech changed me. I saw myself in her, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't even realized I was missing: peace. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was upset or shaken. In fact, for the first time in a very long time, my mind was quiet. Still, I lay in the stiff hotel bed staring at the ceiling fan, watching its slow rotation and thinking, so this is what it feels like to stop chasing love that was never yours to begin with. Because that's what I'd been doing, hadn't I? Chasing. For years. I tried to earn my place in a family that measured success in degrees, status, and carefully edited Christmas letters. I sent them newsletters from the field, photos of girls graduating from our learning hubs, links to interviews where I spoke on international panels. I framed it like pride, but deep down, it was pleading. Look at me. Please just look at me. But standing on that stage earlier, facing an audience that didn't owe me anything and yet chose to see me, I realized something. I didn't need to earn anything. Not anymore. The next morning, I ordered coffee and sat on a bench near the water. The vineyard was out of sight, the noise of the wedding long gone. Just me, a notebook, and the weightless stillness of a clean page. I opened my laptop and began typing a draft of a new initiative. Not for the organization I worked for, but for something that had been sitting in my heart for a long time. A project I'd never allowed myself to fully dream of. Uninvited voices. A platform, a fund, a storytelling movement for the daughters who were left out of weddings, for the sons who never got a chance to speak, for the siblings erased from family group chats, holiday photos, and wills, not because they failed, but because they dared to live differently. The idea flowed like water. We'd offer small grants to individuals doing grassroots work their families didn't understand: artists, educators, social workers. We'd host open mic nights, publish anonymous essays, create a podcast where people could share how they turned rejection into revolution. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was redemption. Later that week, back in New York, I received a message from someone I didn't recognize, a guest from the wedding. "Hi, Samantha. I just wanted you to know your speech stayed with me. I've never seen a family try so hard to pretend someone didn't exist, only for the world to make her unforgettable." I stared at that message for a long moment, then smiled. A few days after that, a small clip from the wedding, just 58 seconds long, went viral on TikTok. Someone had captured my walk down the aisle, the audible gasps, and the closing line of my speech. Sometimes we don't get a wedding invitation, but we get something else. We get seen. The clip exploded. Comments poured in. I needed this more than I can explain. Crying in my car watching this, thank you. To every forgotten sibling out there, this one's for us. My inbox filled with stories. Heartbreaking, raw, beautiful stories. A young man whose parents cut him off for choosing music over med school. A woman whose sister blocked her from the bridal party because she didn't fit the aesthetic. A teacher who wasn't invited to her nephew's graduation because she talked about social justice too much. They weren't bitter. They were just done being invisible. And they saw me, not as a martyr or a victim, but as proof that stepping into your truth can shake the ground others tried to bury you under. One night, weeks later, I sat on my apartment floor, lights dim, awards still sitting unopened on my shelf, and said aloud for no one but myself, "You weren't too much. You were too real." And that was enough. More than enough. The irony hit me on a random Tuesday afternoon. I was deep in a Zoom call with a group of young women in Nairobi, discussing their plan to start a mobile library, part of our latest Uninvited Voices microgrant program, when my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, but it kept buzzing. 5 times, then 6. I finally glanced down. Dad. Not home, not mom and dad. Just Dad. I hadn't seen that name on my screen in over 4 months. My hand hovered over the decline button, the way it used to when I was younger and unsure of how to explain myself. But this time, I clicked answer. Hi. There was silence on the line, then a breath. Samantha, it's me, your father. I know, I said, my voice even. He cleared his throat like he was struggling to speak around a truth that had waited too long. I saw the article in Time and the CNN piece. Madison showed us the podcast you were on. He paused. I didn't know the scope of it, of what you do, what you've done. I didn't rush in to fill the silence. He continued. I guess I always thought if something didn't come with a resume, a stock option, or a donor gala, it wasn't real. But I watched your speech again, the one at the wedding. His voice cracked. You didn't say anything cruel, but you said everything that needed to be said. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Not from pain, but from shock. My father had never been good at apology, never good at emotion. His language was numbers, logistics, outcomes. And now here he was trying to speak mine. I wanted to say I'm sorry for not seeing you for excluding you. We thought we were protecting Blake's day, but we were really protecting ourselves from the truth. That was the first time I cried. Not the kind of cry that buckles your knees, but the kind that simply lets go. Quiet. Cleansing. I appreciate that, I said softly. Really? Would you consider, he added, coming to dinner sometime? Just you and me. No photos, no speeches, just a conversation. I nodded, even though he couldn't see. I'll think about it. And for now, that was enough. That same week, our first Uninvited Voices Community Center opened in Atlanta, a humble storefront that used to be a laundromat, now transformed into a bright, cozy space filled with books, stage lights, podcast equipment, and a chalkboard wall filled with affirmations written by people who'd once been silenced. At the opening event, Imani, our first grantee, stood on stage and read a poem she'd written just for that night. We are the uninvited, the overlooked, the left out of group texts, but here we build microphones out of wounds and stages out of everything they said we weren't. The crowd gave her a standing ovation, and in that moment, I realized something else. I hadn't just reclaimed my voice. I had given others permission to reclaim theirs. One evening, a familiar voice chimed from behind me at the center. Nice space. I turned. It was Blake, in jeans, no suit, no smugness. He looked tired. I heard about this place through Madison, he said, nodding at the shelves of donated books and a group of teens laughing in the corner. I figured I'd stop by. I raised an eyebrow. You figured? He chuckled lightly. Okay, I wanted to see it. And maybe, I don't know, understand you better. I didn't say anything, just motioned for him to follow. I led him through the space, past the quote wall, where someone had scrawled, "Sometimes silence is survival, but speaking is rebirth." Past the listening booth where people recorded anonymous letters to the family members who'd never heard them. And finally, we stopped in front of a small framed picture near the exit. It was from that wedding. The exact moment I stood at the microphone, the sun behind me, the award glinting in my hand, not triumphant, but grounded. He stared at it. I should have invited you, Blake murmured. I shouldn't have let Mom and Dad push you out. I looked at him and saw not the brother I used to chase approval from, but a man learning how to carry his own regrets. You didn't push me out, I said. You just didn't stop them when they did. He nodded slowly. Then finally, can I help? With the center? I studied him, long enough for it to get uncomfortable. Then I smiled. Yeah, you can start by sweeping the floor. We've got open mic night tomorrow and it gets messy. I didn't plan on going back. The house I grew up in, that 2-story colonial on Birchwood Lane with the blue shutters and the white swing on the porch, had stopped feeling like home long before I ever left. But healing has a funny way of circling back. Sometimes it nudges, sometimes it demands, and sometimes It whispers, "Go back. Not for them, for you." So one quiet Sunday afternoon, I found myself standing at the edge of the driveway, hands tucked into the pockets of my coat, heart oddly steady. The front yard was exactly the same. Hydrangeas neatly trimmed, flag fluttering gently. That same stone rabbit statue under the maple tree, now chipped at the ear. Familiar, unchanged. The door opened before I knocked. It was her, my mother. She didn't look surprised, just tired. And for the first time in my life, she didn't have lipstick on or pearls around her neck. No hosting face, no social armor, just June Green. The woman who'd orchestrated a wedding guest list that erased her daughter. The woman who taught me how to bake but never asked about the things that fed my soul. The woman who once whispered, "Samantha just doesn't understand how the world works," when she thought I wasn't listening. And yet, here she stood, older, softer, more fragile than I remembered. "Hi, Mom," I said. She stepped aside. "Come in, it's cold." The house smelled like cinnamon and lemon cleaner. Everything was still in its place. The family photos, the fireplace mantle, the heirloom china no one ever used. But I noticed something different this time. There were no pictures of the wedding on the sideboard. Only one new frame sat there. A news clipping from Time magazine, laminated, with my photo on stage at the vineyard. I blinked. "You kept that?" She nodded, hands fidgeting. "I didn't know what else to do," she said quietly. "You didn't return my messages." "I never got them," I replied. "You never sent them." She looked up sharply, but then her face softened. "You're right." We stood in silence, the weight of decades resting in the space between us. Then she said something I never thought I'd hear. "I didn't know how to love you." My breath caught. I knew how to love Blake. That kind of success, I understood. But you scared me, Samantha. You were bold. You were stubborn. You were everything I gave up when I chose safety. She blinked hard, her voice barely above a whisper now. "And I punished you for it." I sat down at the edge of the couch, trying to hold back the tears suddenly pushing behind my eyes. Because that sentence, that one sentence, "I didn't know how to love you," was the key that had been rusting in the lock of my heart for years. And now, it finally turned. She sat beside me, but didn't reach for my hand. And I was grateful. Because the honesty between us didn't need to be wrapped in false comfort. "I didn't come here for an apology," I said. "I came here to let go." She nodded. "I'm proud of you," she said. I looked at her. "Are you proud of me because the world sees me now, or because you finally do?" She didn't flinch. "Both," she admitted, but especially the second one. For the first time, I believed her. Not because it was perfect, not because everything was fixed, but because she had named the wound. And sometimes, that's where healing starts. I left the house just as the sun began dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That chapter, the one filled with tight smiles and silence at the dinner table, with empty birthday cards signed "Love Mom and Dad," and nothing more. It was closed, but not with bitterness, with peace. That night, I wrote a post for Uninvited Voices that simply read, "Forgiveness is not always reconciliation, but sometimes it's choosing to walk back through the door, not to be accepted, but to accept yourself." The comments flooded in. People shared stories of letters never sent, of mothers who never changed, and ones who did, of choosing therapy, of choosing to leave, of choosing finally to heal. And in that messy, complicated chorus of strangers, I felt home. Not the house on Birchwood Lane, but this collective space where being uninvited didn't mean being unloved. 2 months after I visited my mother, I got an email that made me pause mid-sentence while editing a grant proposal. Subject line, "Invitation. Green Financial Women's Impact Gala." I stared at it for a full minute, almost laughing. Not because it was unexpected, but because it was so predictable. The message was from the board of Green Financial, the company my father had run for over 30 years. The same company that once quietly removed my name from the family foundation page without telling me. The same board that had sponsored Blake's MBA and issued press releases for every new business deal he landed. And now they wanted me. We would be honored if you'd accept our Woman of the Year award for global impact at our upcoming gala in New York. The event will be televised and attended by our top clients and press partners. Your story has inspired many, and we believe your presence will represent the values of our legacy. I read it twice. Then again. No mention of the wedding, no mention of the years of exclusion, just shiny PR language. Your presence will represent the values of our legacy. Their legacy, the same one that once treated me like a deviation? I closed the laptop, took a breath, and didn't reply. Later that day, I brought it up to Mia, my best friend, co-director at Uninvited Voices, and the only person allowed to give me the hard truths. She read the email and raised an eyebrow. So, they want to use you as a redemption arc. Classic. I know, I said. It's tempting, though. I mean, televised, big audience. Would boost the org. She tilted her head. But would it boost you, or just them? I stayed silent, because part of me, the younger version, still seeking that seat at the Green family table, wanted to say yes. To walk into that ballroom in a custom dress and own the stage again. To force them to recognize me. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I didn't need to be seen by them, because now I was building the spotlight for others. That weekend, we hosted a gathering in Detroit, our biggest Uninvited Voices event yet. Over 200 attendees, 16 speakers, a community mural, and at the end, a young girl, maybe 15, came up to me with a trembling voice. You don't know me, but I used to feel like I didn't exist. Until I saw your story. She reached into her backpack and handed me a small painting, a watercolor of a broken staircase with light spilling down from the top. At the bottom was a figure walking up, alone, but glowing. She'd titled it, Climbing Without Permission. I knew my answer. The next day, I replied to Green Financial, Thank you for the kind invitation. I'm proud of the work I do, and I recognize the significance of honoring global impact. However, I respectfully decline. Uninvited Voices was built for those who were told they didn't belong in legacy spaces like yours. I'm not here to represent your values. I'm here to challenge them. Warmly, Samantha Green. I hit send and felt a weight lift off me. Not the kind of weight that drags you down, but the kind that no longer needs to be carried. 3 days later, a reporter reached out. Apparently, someone from the gala committee had leaked my response. They asked for an interview. I agreed. But I didn't go to a fancy studio or wear a red carpet dress. Instead, we filmed the segment inside our newest Uninvited Voices Center in Chicago, right beside a wall covered with handwritten notes from people who'd once been told they were too loud, too queer, too poor, too strange, too off-brand. The segment aired under the title, The Daughter Who Said No, and built something bigger. It exploded online. Again. And here's the twist no one saw coming. That same week, Forbes listed Uninvited Voices on their top 30 social impact startups to watch. That article was forwarded to me by Blake, along with a text that simply read, You didn't need the gala. You are the legacy now. 6 months after I declined the gala invitation, I found myself standing in a community garden in Oakland, hands covered in soil, sweat running down my back, surrounded by a group of teenage girls planting their first crop of tomatoes. One of them, Brielle, looked up from the ground and asked, Miss Samantha, did you always know this is what you wanted to do? I paused, brushing my hands on my jeans. No, I said honestly. I just knew what I didn't want. I didn't want to keep shrinking to fit into rooms where people only valued me when I was silent. She grinned. So you made your own room? I smiled. Exactly. She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and went back to digging. That night I walked through the tiny Uninvited Voices Center we'd opened next door. Just 2 classrooms, a recording booth, and a mural wall that was still half finished. As I passed the chalkboard near the door, I noticed someone had written in big letters, You don't need their invitation. You are the reason the door exists. I trace the chalk with my fingertips, heart swelling, not with pride, with peace, the kind of peace that doesn't come from being applauded. It comes from knowing you're no longer seeking applause. When I got home that evening, I made myself tea and curled up on my old creaky couch with a blanket and my dog, Olive. I opened my laptop, stared at the blinking cursor on a blank page, and finally began writing the book I'd put off for years. Title: The Uninvited Ones. It wasn't a memoir. It was a mirror for everyone who ever got left out, overlooked, dismissed, or erased. For the girls who weren't bridesmaids, the sons who weren't mentioned in toasts, the siblings who were always told, "You're just different." And for the ones who walked into rooms they weren't supposed to be in and changed the entire energy without raising their voice. I didn't end the book with a grand success story or a happily ever after. I ended it with something simple: a scene. Me sitting alone in the park with a coffee, watching a mother braid her daughter's hair on a picnic blanket nearby, and a single thought: I may not have been invited, but I'm exactly where I belong. Sometimes, the greatest revenge isn't showing them what you became. It's no longer needing them to see it at all. Thank you for walking this story with me. If you've ever built yourself back up from silence, tell your story in the comments, because someone out there needs to hear it. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. You never know whose voice you're helping set free.